So if I have it correct, last week we ended with Genesis chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, the reality is, in order for us to move into 15, we probably ought to go back a couple sections and just remind ourselves where we've been and what we've been reading. So I'm going to start with verse 10 and read through verse 16, just to make sure we're putting it in context. So the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." But the Lord said to him, "Not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So it can go back into 10 through 14, but really we're looking at 15 and forward. What do you notice, and what questions does it make you ask? Go for it.
Okay. So my question for a long time is, why is it so important for God to want this in scripture of Cain, the person who kills Cain, it's a 7-fold punishment, important number, but a 7-fold punishment. And then it never discusses Cain's death. And we do know that the flood occurred, which was God's doing. And it says that Cain would wander the earth.
So that's multifaceted question. So give me your parts again.
So God found it important enough to give Cain the curse, which causes 7-fold punishment on anyone who sins him.
7-fold punishment. Okay. What? Keep going. What are the other parts of your question?
So it doesn't discuss Cain's death, even though it goes through the lineage here in a minute.
Okay. No discussion of Cain's death and 7-fold punishment. What else?
The flood that comes, I know that we're jumping, but I'm just curious why it's so important for this part of scripture to be in there about the 7-fold punishment to the one who kills him, when it's, and then the important, another important part is that he's going to wander the earth. So did God design that so that Cain never dies? Did it come into play that God killed Cain in the flood? Or it's the phone. Okay.
So let's look at these pieces. And let's look at them individually, but I want to take them out of order if that's okay. So back in verse 10, it actually says let's go to verse 11. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground. Okay, that's what God actually says is going to happen, right? It says you will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Is God saying that that's his punishment or that's his reality?
Reality.
It to a certain degree. You okay?
No.
Okay. we'll get it figured out. We have to separate out consequences for actions from actually divine judgment and punishment. And we've been doing this last couple of weeks, especially with the Adam and Eve story, and we have to do it again here now. The reality is, this notion of being a wanderer on the earth is a consequence of his action. It's not a punishment for what he has done. The punishment, and actually even the consequence of this, it says that the ground will no longer yield to him. What does that mean? Let's think this through just a little bit, because it probably needs to be gained out. We have to think this through. Our gut is that God is punishing him, correct? But instead, there's a sense in which this is a consequence of his actions. And the reality is, God is making him dependent on other people. Do you get what I'm saying with that? He took another person's life in order to get what he wanted. But because he's done that, now for the rest of his life, he's going to have to depend on other people to get what he needs. He can no longer get it himself. Do you see what God is doing with that? He's flipping the script. Instead of Cain taking it, from this point forward, he's going to have to barter and work for it and trade for it. He's going to have to do something else, because what was it that Cain did before him? You guys remember? He was a farmer. His primary vocation, his primary way of providing, is no longer going to be accessible to him. He ruined his job. Do you see that? And so consequently, his wandering about the earth is he's going to have to find people who are willing to trade with him to get what he's used to getting for himself. There's a sense in which God is creating an interdependence for Cain. Do you get what I'm saying there? Yes, no, maybe so. Not getting it, Chad. Okay. So, I think I remember the answer to this question, but maybe not. What was it you retired from?
Same place.
That's what I was thinking, so. A person who breaks the law for the rest of their life is marked by the law, are they not? Now, it may not be a physical mark, but they have a file now, and you can search, you can do a background check, and you can get all that information. Most of it's public knowledge, correct? And oftentimes, they now become, to a certain degree, dependent on the system to help them live anything close to a normal life, do they not?
Well, yes.
Now, the irony is, by bucking the system, you become more dependent upon the system. Is that not true, generally?
Not true, you have to depend on other people.
And so there's a reality here where Cain's job was to be a farmer, and he was used to the ground giving him what he needed. Now, my guess is he probably took his grain and produce and traded for the other things that he needed, because that was just commonplace at this point in human history. But from this point forward, he doesn't even have the produce of the ground to trade with, because that's what he's used to. So he's going to have to learn how to, instead of taking from other people, he's going to have to learn how to trade with other people and barter with other people. And he's going to have to become more dependent on other people, not less dependent. Do you get what I'm saying? Now, his caveat to that is, I can't do that, Lord. You're driving me from the ground. When people see me, they're going to want to kill me, right? Now we're going to the top of the list, your first marker here. The sevenfold punishment. Anybody want to be punished? No. Anybody want 7 times the punishment for the action done? That goes on deterrent, doesn't it? Do you get what I'm saying? All throughout Scripture, we're going to see God say, vengeance is mine. It's not your job to take vengeance, it's my job. He is the judge, he is the jury, he is the executioner. It's God's role. Cain is afraid because he has committed the murder. It started a snowball effect. Because what happens? What happens in real life? When someone wrongs someone else, that other person and their family turns around, and they don't just make it even, do they? Typically, they one up each other, don't they? And it turns into this vicious cycle till eventually we're slaughtering whole people groups because of what they did for us. And oftentimes we fail to even know what that first action was that caused things to get bad. And so God is saying, you guys remember what the number 7 meant? Perfection. So it's not so much that God is saying, I'm going to kill 7 people if you kill Cain. It's God saying, I'm going to give perfect retribution for those who take your life. You are now, for the rest of your days, going to become a warning to everyone else. Do not take another person's life, or what you hold most dear will be taken from you. His livelihood, his farmerness is taken from him, is it not? And it's really not even taken from him so much as the ground is like, I'm disgusted with you. I'm not going to let you do what you used to do. He gave it away when he took this action upon himself. Do you get what I'm saying with that? Yes, no? Starting to get there. So God's judgment is that murder is so bad, you shouldn't even kill a murderer. That's God's job. Do you get what I'm saying? Life is so precious, it's not for a single person to take it, even if it's justified. That's God's standard. Now we're going to see as time goes on and as people grow into more organized units, God will start to set parameters, and he will put, a couple weeks ago, I preached on Romans 12, and it says, submit to the governing authorities. God will put people and governments into place to do this work on his behalf, but it's never an individual's job. Do you get what I'm saying with this? There's a reason why in our country, which is based off of the Levitical law, the judicial system requires a jury of your peers. No one person is supposed to have the authority to pass judgment on another person. Are you tracking with me? And typically, when it comes to a capital crime, you got to have at least 12, right? Because then can you just point to one person? It literally has to be all of them together, and bare minimum a preponderance of at least 7 of the 12. So you can't just say, oh, it's their fault. You render judgment against me. You're the deciding vote. We don't even want that in our system, because God says the burden of taking another person's life should never be on one person. Do you get what I'm saying with this? So at this point in time in human history, how many human beings are there? We really don't know. But is it very many? It can't be a lot. We're definitely not talking more than at most maybe a couple hundred, but most of them are going to be young, are they not? I mean, if we really, because we don't know how old Cain and Abel really are. But suffice it to say that there are so few people that God says, I don't want anyone to take this. It's mine to pass this judgment on you. That's what that 7-fold punishment is about. No one else needs to take this in hand, because the thing of it is, anybody serve in the military here? You did? Did you ever have to take a life?
No,
No. When you were in duty, did you ever have to take a life?
did not.
I've talked to a handful of people who actually had to take the life of another. And even when it was justified, and even when it was in self-defense, and even when it was under the command of their superior officer, that action, even when it was right and legal and good, still haunted them for the rest of their life. You don't escape murder easy. Do you get what I'm saying? Am I making sense with this? And so God is saying his initial plan is that this level of judgment stands only for him. And he puts a high enough penalty on it that the hope is that no one will do it. Do you get what I'm saying? And it's really about, it's not so much sevenfold that is perfect. That sevenness is the perfection idea of a sevenfold punishment, a perfect punishment. Am I getting clear with that? So the reality is what God has done is made him dependent on other people, but rather than lean into what God has called him to do, he gets angry about it and he wanders. He will not depend on other people. He tries to do it on his own. Do you see this happening? And so he becomes a wanderer because he's not willing to accept what God has given to him in how to live forward, moving forward. Does that make sense, Kaylee?
Yeah.
Tracking so far? No?
Yeah,
Kind of?
it is in a roundabout.
And the reality of what you said about the fact that we don't know of when he died is proof that his death came at God's hands.
Like a old age is what you're saying.
It could be of old age. It might be that God said you're done. But the reality is we never hear of his death because no human took that punishment into their own hands to do.
So would God have,
Ask it. Go for it.
I mean, he definitely states a sevenfold punishment on the person who takes the life of Cain. So if God is the one who took the life of Cain, I don't know, it just seems to me, I guess I'm understanding it a little bit better, but
Verse 15. But the Lord said to him, not so. And again, that not so is dealing with what Cain is griping about. Cain said, my punishment is more than I can.
Get the sound on that.
Today, you're driving me from the land. Is God driving him from the land?
Oh, because that's,
God's not the one doing the driving, is he? He has done this to himself. The third piece here is, I will be hidden from your presence. Is Cain hidden from God's presence? No, we've discussed this over and over and over again. There is nowhere you can go to be hidden from God's presence. And then he says, and I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will want to kill me. And so God is answering all of his complaints about his reality that he brought on himself. And God's saying, I'm going to go with you. I will put this mark on you so that no one will do what you're afraid is going to be done to you. It's what you deserve, but no one will do it because vengeance is mine, says God. Are you getting what I'm saying with this?
What do you think was the mark, since everybody could see it?
scarlet letter.
So this is one of the most debated topics in the book of Genesis. There have been a number of things that have been thrown out, but the word mark that is used here is hot. It literally can mean anything. It might be a spiritual mark, it could be a flying sign above his head, spiritually speaking. This guy is under God's protection. It might be a literal mark, a tattoo. We were joking earlier. Maybe it's, he's been in prison. He's got the teardrop or something like that because he committed murder. I don't know. The reality is we don't know. What I can tell you is I've heard some things, and I do not affirm this at all. I do not think that God made Cain black. I've heard that. I think that's wrong. That is not what the mark of Cain is. If it was something, it was something only to him. Pigment, malignant, that passes down to generation to generation. That's not what we're talking about. This is something unique to Cain only.
Study notes in my Bible references Ezekiel, and it says mark means taw, T-A-W, which is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And looks like an X.
They're stretching.
Well, I mean, I have the same question as Mike did, okay?
And it's a question that people have wrestled with for years. And the reality is, it was something unique to Cain. It's not something that I believe God has ever done since.
So it could have just been some kind of a aura or something surrounding him that when people saw him, they knew.
Could have been an aura in the same way that it, when we get into Exodus, when Moses is in God's presence and his face shines and they tell him to put a veil on because he's scaring everybody. It could be that. But the thing of it is what is clear is God is going with him and God will protect him every step of the way. But what it actually is, that's on my short list of questions. Well, it's probably within the top 100. That list is getting longer all the time. But I'm sure we'll probably be able to ask that question. But we don't know. What we do know is it's unique to him. It's something that everyone in existence at this point in time would see it, would know it, and would understand what it meant. Beyond that,
It really isn't important. For those times, that's what God wanted and that's what worked. So.
the sad reality is it's not enough down the road.
Yeah.
The warning that God gives humanity through Cain's actions, we're going to eventually see people disregard completely. Yes.
No, for I will give a sevenfold punishment to anyone who kills you. Is that a punishment or a blessing?
So, she just asked the question, and I don't think this was a question she's asking, but what she said is the sevenfold punishment could almost also be a sevenfold blessing. Because the reality is, whether you're in God's will or outside of God's will, God's presence is one and the same. We've talked about this. Being in God's presence is experiencing his love. And if you are good, if you're doing what God wants, it is a blessing. It is God's love. If you are not good and you're not doing what you're supposed to, God's presence is a punishment. It is fear. It is, this notion of shame and that we are in the wrong and there's a hiding from it. But I don't think that it's something that anybody would have seen as a blessing, because God's ability to bring vengeance is a little bit stronger than yours or ours, is it not? I mean, God can do so much more than any of us could do on our own. And so I'm not for certain, to a certain degree, the mark on Cain is a blessing from God. Do you get what I'm saying by that? It to a certain degree, Melissa made the notion of it's that scarlet letter. You guys remember that book, right? That story. Over time, that mark became a badge of honor instead of being the sign of her guilt. But the reality, and there probably, if Cain walked with God and did what God wanted, then to a certain degree, it would be seen as, a blessing, because Cain's under more protection by God than anybody else is. And yet he's under more protection by God because he deserves a greater punishment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Kind of.
Do you need to rephrase your question? No? Anybody else? this is a hard passage to deal with because this is the first time. Well, it's not really the first time. I mean, this is the second time God has had to step in and say, you guys are misbehaving and now I got to do something about it, right? But this time it's more complex because Adam and Eve's sin was permanent, but it wasn't a physical sin. It only brought the spiritual death, right? This is bringing a permanent physical death on top of the spiritual death. Does that make sense? I'm losing everybody. Anything else?
So in the land of Nod,
In the land of Nod,
the Lord's presence was not there.
how do you get that?
Cain left the Lord's presence and settled in the land of Nod.
So that's the question. What is it saying by Cain left the Lord's presence? That's more of the question, is it not?
That's correct.
Because what have we determined about God?
Physical.
He left God's physical presence when God came down to render this reality for the act of the murder, but he cannot leave God's presence because God is everywhere.
I think Cain thought he was, though.
Cain may have thought he was leaving God behind, but he's not.
Right.
He left this place, this field of judgment, but he hasn't left God's presence. Anything else on that? Or is that clear as mud? Okay? Do we know where Nod is?
East of Eden.
East of Eden. Do we know where that is?
Oh, west of Nod.
What's the
West of Nod. Do we know where Eden or Nod are?
No.
Well,
No.
in Eden, at the confluence of those three rivers.
Yeah, I mean, they're in.
So that's what it said. Okay. Now I watched, as I was digging into this, I heard an interesting perspective. We lived in Tell City for 6 years, and Tell City was founded by Swiss colonists. The reason they chose Tell City was because as they were coming down the Ohio River, they said the hills and the valleys here feel the most like home. It wasn't the mountains, the Swiss Alps, but it was like the hills they were used to. And so they settled that as their home. All throughout the United States, there are places called London and Brisbane and Barcelona and Berlin and all different Mexico. And we name places based on how they remind us of other places. That's often what happens. And if we can't think of anything else, then we just make something up, right? But there's like 20 different Londons across the United States. You know, there's a bunch of different Washingtons, and they're named that to elicit something different. And so what this guy was saying is that, and we're jumping ahead to the flood, that was your fourth piece here. After the flood, do we know where Eden and Nod are? We don't. But it could very easily be that the Tigris and the Euphrates were named the Tigris and Euphrates because they reminded them of the Tigris and Euphrates River from before. Do you get what I'm saying by that? It doesn't mean that they're the same rivers. It doesn't mean that they're in the same places. Because the reality is that the Tigris and Euphrates don't have the same headwater. They don't come from the same place. They flow parallel to each other in our world, but to say that they're the same would be wrong because they're not irrevocably yoked to the same starting spot. And so many of the places that get named are named for things they remember. Do you get what I'm saying with that? it elicited those memories of how things were before. And so this Tigris and this Euphrates are not the same Tigris and Euphrates of the Garden of Eden.
So no, we don't know.
We really don't know. But I want to acknowledge that we have the world before the flood and the world after the flood. And those two worlds are not going to be the same at all. I mean, has anybody ever been to a catastrophic flood? The aftermath of a catastrophic flood?
Typically don't erase rivers though.
River,
Rivers can change.
Rivers change paths, they can change the way they work. But the thing of it is that said
Still there. Like-
they're still there, but if the entire world is underwater, is there a river anymore?
No, but it did go down.
Eventually it did, but as the water receded, it cut new rivers. It cut new realities. The world was completely changed, and we'll get there. Well, probably about Christmas time is ready for it. Yes,
Also, whenever the flood happened, water came from the ground.
it does very clearly, and we'll talk about this in detail, it does very clearly say that water comes from the ground, completely disrupting the earth as they knew it.
Well, we gotta remember, I mean, there was, what, 6 people? To name everything
8
again.
people were left after the flood. And of course, we'll get there. Maybe we'll get there by Christmas. I don't know.
This footnote says nod means wandering. So is nod a physical place or is it a state of being?
Ooh. So her note said that nod means wandering. And her question is it an actual physical place or is it a state of being? What do you guys think?
That's actually what my Bible app was saying as well, is that it comes from the Hebrew word nod, which means to wander. And so as a being, it was just his wandering aimlessly.
Yeah, he may have become more of a nomad town as opposed to a settled town, and just a place, a group of people that just kind of meander around, and they're in that general area. But where that exactly is, what season is it? Where are they at? I would say that is an intentional double meaning, and it probably means both. For the rest of his days, rather than doing what God called him to do, and depending on other people, he would just go from place to place, and people found out who he was and what his story was, and then he would be afraid, and so he'd move on to somewhere else. That would be my guess. Because that's the way the human people are we not? Rarely do we want to face the reality of our actions and say, no, I'm not who I once was. I'd say in your line of work, you saw that quite a bit, didn't you? Usually once you become an offender, you become a repeat offender. Very rarely does someone learn the lesson and change their life. It does happen. It does happen, but not very often. And so I'd say, yes, it's that double meaning is intended. Aaron, what else did we have? Was that was it? She beat you too. Anything else? Ready to read the next section then? 17 and 18. Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city, and he named it after his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Mahaziel, and Mahaziel was the father of Methushael, and Methushael was the father of Lamech. Anything in this?
Where did his wife come from?
Where did his wife come from? A perennial question. We don't get God making anymore, right? Because on the 7th day, God rested from his work. So this has to be human beings that were produced by Adam and Eve. That's the only answer we're given. Now, there is out there some people who believe that God created other humans But that is extra biblical and it's never been considered part of what we truly believe. So his wife had to be his sister. Yep. And this is not, kissing cousins kind of thing. We have to remember, at this point in time, humanity was made very good. The laws about prohibiting marrying your siblings or your cousins come generations from now. And we know in our world today, those laws exist to keep the genetic anomalies from being multiplied in the kids. That's the primary reason for that law. Interestingly enough, did some research on this one, not because I wanted to, but because I was asked to. If both are beyond the age of having kids, at least in the state of Indiana and Ohio, you can marry your first cousin. Huh?
That seems right.
If they're both beyond having kids, they cannot have children, then you are legally allowed, at least in Indiana and Ohio, to marry your first cousin. But if you can have kids, it's illegal. It was really odd to me because we had a couple that they were both in their first spouse had passed away. They were first cousins once removed. But they just enjoyed being together and they wanted the companionship and they didn't want to lose their retirement benefits, and so they got married and it was legal. But the reality of, what our immediate revulsion to Cain marrying his sister comes from our current reality of what we know happens then. But understand that humanity was not as broken as it is today either. Anything else? Go for it, Aaron.
Well, it doesn't make it any better, but could it have been Abel's?
It could have been Abel's daughter. Could have been. Yep, we don't know.
It doesn't say anything about Abel having.
All we know is he was absolutely related to her. Yes.
Like on Genesis, we don't touch very often on the fact that this was all written based on stories from 2,000 years before from other people that mostly are all dead.
So why don't we touch on the fact that this happened multiple generations beforehand? Well, if you remember, which I don't expect you do, because we've had a lot happen, week 1, I said, all of the Old Testament we have because they were an oral culture who eventually wrote it down. And the truth of the matter is many of the details that we in our modern world would want, we don't have because their oral culture didn't see them as important. But because the story was so important and because it was an oral culture, if you ever told the story wrong, everybody who was hearing the story would correct you. Do you get what I'm saying with that? Because we're not an oral culture. We have become a text culture. For us, it needs to be the written word in order to be verified. And yet, to a certain degree, we still acknowledge this oral culture piece. Before my grandparents passed away, we were having a family reunion, and someone was trying to remember the story. And then everybody started telling the story together to make sure that all the details were the same. And for a little bit, they debated. Well, I thought it was so-and-so. No, I really thought it was so-and-so. And then the third person, no, it really was that person. They're like, oh yeah, everybody remembered. It was that person, not this person. That collective storytelling is still a part of our DNA today. But we rely so heavily on the text that we forget that that's how information was transmitted for well over the past 6,000 years. And so to a certain degree, yes, this was an oral culture. These are bare minimum. These are over 1,000 years before this these things took place over 1,000 years before they were written down. But that story had been told over and over and over and over and over and over again. You ever tell your kids, do you remember when you did so and so? And what we had to do to you because you did so and so? You ever find yourself doing that? It's a reminder, right? We tell stories to remember. They told stories to remember. So it shouldn't surprise us that they would be able to keep this amount of details. It's just it was just the way their culture worked. But it is a good reminder because we don't operate this way. There was a sense of collective knowledge. No one person was considered the bearer of all of the information. People told the story in community.
Like whenever I'm reading the Bible, I like with that whole verse 15. Every verse makes me sit there and wonder, like, what is God's message in this? Like, what am I missing? What do I need to get from this? But knowing that this comes from 1,000 years down the road, it kind of gives me like a little glimpse of that detail that I'm looking for is probably just not that necessarily important. Like the little bit of missing pieces in it makes me feel like it's just not that important to focus on.
For most of human history, the moral of the story was more important than the details of the story. It's only been in our modern world where the details of the story are more important, or at least equally important to the moral of the story. You get what I'm saying with that?
That would be really handy to tell new believers.
And so,
Sure.
in some ways, this story here is more about this than it is about the fact that Cain murdered Abel. This story was told over and over and over again because all throughout Scripture we get this vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Over and over and over again, I will return judgment. I will be the judge, not you. It's my job to take this on, not you. And that stems all the way back to here, right here in the beginning of the story. God says, okay, humanity, you guys have crossed the line. And I know what's going to happen. You're going to want to take the judgment upon yourself to enact it. And it's only going to make things worse, not better. So God's saying, here's the line, do not cross this. Across that line, that's mine to take care of. And so that point is the moral of the story. Right? And so, yeah, you're right. We want more of the details because we have. Yeah, I'm going to go here. Why would we want more of the details?
Add to the drama of the story.
Somewhat to add to the drama of the story.
To kind of work our way around it, or
To see if we can find a workaround. Oh, well, I didn't kill him that way, so therefore that punishment isn't on me. I remember the first time I watched a movie that was part of the, it was in the running for Academy Award for Best Picture. And Liz and I watched this movie and we're like, what was the point of that movie? It made zero sense whatsoever. There was nothing redeemable about the 2 hours and 15 minutes we spent watching that movie. And everyone said, but that was the brilliance of it. You had to figure it out. And I'm like, if it's that convoluted, it's not worth my time. I think to a certain degree, the enemy has caused us to get so bogged down in the details, we miss the point. You get what I'm saying by that? If he can't keep us from hearing God's story, then he'll cause us to miss the point of God's story.
he did with Eve and the.
He did the same thing with Eve and the fruit. He twisted the point, did he not? And he's done it here with Cain too. Cain's words to God, I can't handle this. You're gonna drive me away from you. Did God ever once say, I'm gonna leave you alone, you're on your own? He said, the ground's not gonna obey you anymore, but he didn't say anything about what God was gonna do, did he? So to a certain degree, I openly admit, I encourage us, I push us to ask questions. I even encourage us to imagine the details we don't have so that we can get a better picture of the story. But if we ever get to a point where we miss the point of the story, then I've pushed us too far. And you guys have full permission to say, whoa, Samuel, you've gone down the rabbit trail too far, okay? Fair enough? Yes.
So my question is. There's 6 generations here that are all male,
Okay,
no females, or
no females listed. Correct.
so the only female that we know of is Eve and Abel,
Abel wasn't a female. Abel was a son.
or not Abel.
Eve is the only
Yeah,
woman,
Cain's wife is what I meant.
Cain's wife, but we don't have a name for her, do we? So part of what I want you guys to realize is, yes, the reality when this was written down, it was a male-dominated world. You can't get around that. It's just the reality. But when a woman is named, we should take note of that, should we not? Because if it's a male-dominated world and they pretty much only focus on the men, when we do get women, we should pay really close attention, because that means that they're really important to the story. It doesn't mean that there aren't other women. There has to be other women. Men can't give birth, no matter what the world wants to say today. Men can't give birth, so there has to be other women, but we don't have any of them named yet.
The way it was with the feeding of the bread and the fish. Like,
It-
they looked at the women.
They made it a point to say there were 5,000 men plus women and children. It does say that there were others there. It doesn't mean that there were only men. And even that acknowledgement was a shift in culture. So the fact that we don't have any women named for us in our modern society, where we finally come to a place where I would like to say women aren't equal, but there are some areas where you're not. There are some areas where women are.
Superior.
So. Today, yes. There is no more persecuted person in the United States of America than a white man. Because we don't meet any of the minority demographics. Now, is that wrong or right? I don't know.
I know.
We're so mistreated, aren't we? The husbands. But it doesn't concern me that we don't have any women listed. It's just, this is giving the genealogy. Now, what does it say about them? If we get a genealogy of Cain, what's it say? Did anybody take the punishment and kill Cain?
Not that we know of.
Not that we know of. Cain lived long enough to have a legacy, to have heirs, to have grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
So the point of God really putting in the sevenfold is not where my brain was going, but just to really point out his love for his creation. Like
It is saying his love for the creation is he doesn't want anyone else to do something that's going to hinder their ability to live the way he wants them to live.
a hidden message.
It really wasn't a hidden message. It was meant to be, I've got this. Cain will get what he deserves. Death does come for Cain eventually. But it's at God's hands through either old age or God finally said enough's enough and he took him out.
Or he died in the flood.
Or he died in the flood, which would be God's hand, would it not? We want to pull an extra hidden message in that because now we're wanting to go beyond where God took it.
you for clarifying that for me.
Not a problem. It's important. Sometimes you have to go beyond the line to realize this no longer makes sense. And that causes us to come back to the line and say, okay, no, we stay on this side of the line. On this side, everything makes sense. We take one step further and now we're moving into things that it causes us to not understand God, and God seems unloving and God seems unkind. And okay, so we need to step away from that. That's not what we know of God. And so there's a reason I start here in these first 11 chapters of Genesis, because it allows us to learn these skills before we get into really difficult passages like in Joshua and Judges, where they're killing all kinds of people. And we're like, what are you doing here, God? When the kings are doing this and then they're doing that, and this king is good and this king is bad, and we're like, what are you doing here, God? We're learning the principles of who God is and how God works here at the beginning of the story. Does that make sense? He always gives us the choice. And even when we choose poorly, that doesn't mean he stops giving us the choice. And even when we choose really poorly, God never separates himself from us. We might try to separate ourselves from him, but he doesn't separate himself from us. Ready to jump into the next paragraph? 19 through 22. Lamech married two women, one named Ada and the other Zilpah. Ada gave birth to Jabal. He was the father of those who lived in tents and raised livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all who played string instruments and pipes. Zilpah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. So what do you notice? Yeah.
3 women.
We got 3 women. We went from just the one, now we got 3 more. So does God care about the women? Absolutely. What else do you notice? Go for it.
One of them raises livestock, which is why Cain killed Abel.
If one of them raises livestock, but doesn't just raise livestock, he is a nomadic shepherd. He learned how to make tents, mobile dwelling places, and he moved around with his livestock. Anybody history buffs or sociology buffs in the room? According to the modern understanding, is making tents a primitive technology or an advanced technology? Is it? Okay, just wondering. So we have here this notion of something that we would probably call primitive, and yet then what do we have at the end of this? His cousin is a smith that works bronze and iron. Is that a primitive technology or an advanced technology?
Brother, isn't it?
Brother? No, it's
Step brother. It's his half brother.
Ada had Jabal and Jubal and Zilpah, so Tubal-Cain is the cousin of Jabal and Jubal. They're cousins. But still, is working bronze considered an advanced technology or a primitive technology? More advanced. What about working iron?
Yeah.
Advanced even yet more so than that, is it not?
Self-taught? Who taught them
Who taught them?
how to work iron? I don't know how to work.
Who would have had to have taught them?
I mean, don't we get iron out of
Rocks.
rocks, right?
Iron is bronze and iron are both ores that have to be smelted and refined and actually, I mean, It's a pretty big deal. This is not a minor task.
How do you accidentally stumble upon some rock and think, I'm gonna smelt this and get some iron out of it?
What's that?
So most historians claim that the Iron Age, when iron tools were first discovered, was 1200 BCE, 1200 BC. Which is after my understanding that the children of Israel make it into the promised land. In fact, by my reading of it, they've been in the promised land for well over 200 years at that point. So how in the world could you have someone before the flood doing ironworking?
I think we're forgetting that God was still in control of all of this knowledge and wisdom that he could instill in the people that he made.
Absolutely. God is still investing in humanity and giving them knowledge. I read a thing the other day, they found a mummy from 800 BC that actually they did an x-ray scan of it, and this female had in her lower leg an iron rod put in the middle of her bone to shore up her bone so that she could walk again. And they said that it was clear that the bone had healed around that iron shaft. You know when that was discovered, how to do that? Only in the last 150 years. And yet you're talking about 2,800 years ago, they were doing that. We have this sense in which we are so much more advanced than what they were back then. The reality is God has all the knowledge, does he not? And at times they listen to God and God taught them. I think the world was far more advanced than we give it credit for, but because of our own ignorance and our own actions, we lose what God has already given us.
All you have to do is watch the History Channel and watch the huge stones that were moved in half.
It makes no sense to us how that was done. Without our modern machinery, we can't figure out how it would have been done. To find out that they were doing brain surgery in first century Rome in the Colosseum because they wanted to keep their gladiators alive. They knew how to do it then, and we lost it for almost 2,000 years. 1,200 years was before Christ was supposed to be the start of the Iron Age, and yet this is at least 2,000 years before that. But Scripture says they were working iron. So what's it say? God is constantly moving his people towards creation and creativity and learning how to use the world around us. They were not primitives. We have gone through periods of history where we have been primitives, but that doesn't mean that they always were. Do you get what I'm saying with that? Go for it.
Two things, so Jubilee, I'm assuming that's where that comes from. Harps and flute. The word
So-
Jubilee.
Yes.
Okay.
So the word jubile and the word jubilee are related to each other. And jubile is, when it's used as a verb, it means exuberance, joyfulness. It's in that kind of vein. And so the fact that Jubal is the father of all who played stringed instruments and pipes, we don't think of instrumentation as being 5,000 to 6,000 years old. And yet here it is. That would be a modern thing, would it not? And we're not, but that's the thing. What I'm trying to say is this paragraph where we have 3 women mentioned and 3 people who are exploding into knowledge and exploring different things in very different areas. You have husbandry and tent making, you have not just the ability to make music, but the ability to make instruments that make music. And you have this ironworking and bronze working. This they are getting advanced really quick, far faster than what modern historians want to claim.
It had to be some sort of a communal thing because you can't make money and or eat off of harp and flute. So they would have had to have worked together.
So there again, that whole notion, if he made his identity was about making instruments and making music, you can't eat music, can you? There's a whole thing about starving artists, is there not? They are dependent on other people who appreciate what they're doing to help feed them in it. And so here you can see this communal aspect of what God had condemned, came to, is actually coming to fruition in his descendants, is it not? They're learning to live together and they're learning to depend upon each other. The bronze worker and the ironsmith, he can't eat bronze and iron, but he can do those things for the other people and they can give him their livestock. There's a communal aspect here. We're just 4 or 5 generations away, and what would have been a scattering has also allowed for a gathering. It's at both and. God is building community within just a couple of generations of leaving Eden. Yeah.
Do we think the one dude married 2 people because he had 2 sisters and he was the only brother?
We have no idea why he married 2 women, but I can tell you he was probably not the smartest of the bunch. I'm just saying, it's hard enough to keep one woman happy. I wouldn't want to try to keep 2. Well, let's watch that Sister Wives show for a little while, and I thought he is the biggest moron I've ever seen. Not 1, not 2. He didn't stop at 3, he went to 4. No wonder they all divorced him. Sorry, I digress. Yes, get me out of the hole.
So all this is taking place in Enoch.
So all of this is taking place, it seems to imply in and around the community of Enoch, yes. And it seems like that city that he built has become a cultural hub. So is he still a wanderer?
I don't know, but it's kind of nice to see, like, Cain's super messed up, but his lineage is still able to flourish.
In spite of his mistake and his error, it does not condemn his lineage. They do some amazing things. Do we hear anything about this lineage that says that they're bad people?
Oh, it's coming.
It will be coming. But we don't hear, they're not good or bad. They're people who are living life and they're doing neat things. And that's, I never put it in that terminology, but that's important for us to remember. Some people have had some pretty bad parents in their life. And they are not condemned because of what their parents did or did not do. They shouldn't be, but these kids and grandkids live beyond what Cain did.
And flourishing.
And flourishing. It's an important reminder. In God's economy, you are responsible for your own actions. Now, there's going to come a point where we got to figure out what God's meaning by some of the things he says down the road. But up to this point, God holds the individual responsible for what they did or did not do. Anything else you notice?
God likes music.
God likes music. Absolutely.
So do
God likes invention. God has nothing against technology. God has nothing against us learning how to make the most of the world around us. None of this is bad. Melissa, early on in our ministry, she went to we were at a conference and they had a breakout session on creation care. And she's like, that's really good. She was happy to go to it. And she walked away so disappointed because They were talking more about politics and how to lobby the government in caring for our world than they were actually talking about caring for our world. Caring for our world does not mean that we cannot be engaged in the cutting edge of science and technology. God allows for both. Anything else you notice?
There's like a. So Cain sinned. His family continued on. But later on. I have a note in my Bible, that's why I was kind of jumping, but it says Noah's sons were saved because of his faithfulness. So. I don't know.
A person's sin does not condemn their children, their spouse, or others, but it can make a trajectory. It doesn't have to be a predestined trajectory, but it can. Because let's read the next section, 23 and 24. And you're right, Jane, this is where it kind of turns a little bit, unfortunately. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, listen to me, wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. Yes.
He puts himself up on a pedestal.
He puts himself on the pedestal. Did God give this
Punishment.
mark or punishment or whatever? No. He's declaring it for himself. What else do you notice?
Well, I don't think God blessed the polygamy. I think that happened. But it says here someplace that. Now, go ahead. I can't find it right now.
He murders.
He allowed it, but he didn't bless it.
God allowed polygamy. He does not bless it.
But I wonder how much that went on back then.
It wasn't uncommon. Let's put it that way. It wasn't necessarily the norm that everybody did it, but it also wasn't uncommon. Does that make sense to say that?
Abraham and Sarah, I mean, Sarah gave their maid lady to Abraham. Make a baby.
Wasn't it more to like populate the
More
earth,
people.
polygamy back then? Or not?
Polygamy was not accepted just so that the earth can be populated. I would disregard that completely. Polygamy was not within what God said was his will, but he didn't necessarily forbid it either at this point. What we do get is when we move into the law, and specifically once we get into the New Testament, God says it is best for it to only be one man and one woman. From the beginning, God didn't make Adam and Eve and Janet. He made Adam and Eve.
But
That was his primary thing, but yes.
it's probably much more convenient than a woman taking care of herself back in this time.
Yes.
So there was a sense, there's an economic reality that begins to happen. We don't really know yet. It doesn't talk about this, but post-flood, and once we get into, by the time we get to Genesis chapter 12, in the days of Abraham, where we know about when this took place, that we can pinpoint historically what's going on. By that point, men were the ones that made contracts. Men were they were just the head of the household, they were the head of the clan. And so only the head of the clan could make contracts, could do business deals, could barter for things, could make trade. And so therefore, there was a sense in which, for a good chunk of human history, the average lifespan for a man was only about 35 years. And so there were a lot of widowed women and a lot of unmarried women. And so, yes, there is a sense in which we have seen historically where polygamy was allowed so that you didn't have women out there having to just fend for themselves in a world where they had no standing. Because essentially your only option at that point was prostitution. And so there's a sense in which God allows it, but God doesn't necessarily bless it. Did you get the difference?
Like allows it as in to honor the woman that's now a widow, like we're to take care of widows and orphans.
There is that sense, and I mean, we have the whole book of Ruth that deals with this very topic. But we have to, I want to be very clear, there's a difference between what God allows, because God gives us the freedom to choose for ourselves, and what God actually blesses or says commands. There's never a command to marry, to have a second spouse. Yes.
So the way I see it, he's just sitting back, watching all this unfold. And then, of course, in Exodus, he comes up with a commandment about adultery.
Right.
So he's just sitting back, watching all this unfold, and then flood comes or whatever, then it just starts over with commandments. Like to prevent all this from happening again.
What is the primary place for knowledge?
Experience.
Like learn.
It's got to be learned or experienced. But where can we get that knowledge and experience from?
Yeah, forefathers.
Yeah.
Some of it's trial and error, some of it's what's written down. But more often than not, you need someone to teach you, do you not? And God has said from the beginning, He would be our teacher. He would lead us into all wisdom and knowledge. He was the source of knowledge until we ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so there's a sense in which God has always said, come to me and I will lead you into what is true. I will tell you what is good. I will tell you what is right. Do we as human beings do that? About 1 to 2% of the time. We're far more apt to try it ourselves, make the mistake, and when we do it wrong, then we try and learn the lesson. That's why things like this are so important. We need others who are on the same journey as us, who are also seeking God and seeking God's wisdom and seeking God's knowledge, so that we don't make the stupid errors, so that we don't do the wrong things. Because God says over and over again, I will give you my truth. I am the source of truth. And I think this, the sad reality of this passage, these two things, is Lamech's kids are doing great. They're getting wisdom and knowledge from God that we would say is far more advanced than what history says they should be doing at this point in time. Right? And yet, then he goes and does something really stupid, and he takes the seed of God and says, if somebody tries to kill me, they're not going to have a 7-fold revenge, they're going to have a 77-fold revenge, or a 49 times revenge, or however you want to do it. How many murders are committed in this passage? Somebody said it. At least 2. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. He's killed at least 2 people.
That was just a further description.
The language is that these are 2 different people. There is a man of regular full adult age, and a young man. One wounded him and one injured him. He uses 2 different languages to accentuate. This is 2 different acts of vengeance.
The Bible makes it sound like one.
Your Bible makes it sound like one?
Mine too.
Yours does too?
To attack and wound.
My brain makes it sound like one.
Your brain makes it sound like one? Yours has,
Mine says, I have killed a man who attacked me, comma, a young man who wounded me. Like it's this, all in one,
That's what mine says.
comma, and not a.
It's a detail we don't have to get bogged down with.
it is a detail we don't have to get bogged down with, but now pull out the Hebrew to see what I agree. Let's see.
Someone died.
Yeah.
Someone died.
That's reasonable.
Listen to my words. For a man I have killed because of my wound, and a young man I have for my hurt. For sevenfold is Cain avenged, and Lamech 77. That's the literal Hebrew wording. So the Hebrews seems to paint more that it's two different ones, which is why he's invoking 77 and not just 7. He's like, earlier you asked this question, and there's almost a sense in which maybe some people might, and I think Lamech is doing this. He saw that Cain killed Abel, and God blessed him with a 7-fold revenge, so nobody could take him on. So now Lamech, he's killed 2 people, so he's getting the 7-fold revenge from God. And that's not the way God works, is it? What was that, Jane?
I don't think I'd take a chance on that.
You don't think you'd take a chance on that? Spin the wheel, let's see what happens, right? What is clear is this is just sad. It's absolutely wrong. Where his kids are doing well for themselves, Lamech is choosing a different path. Yes.
It just occurred to me, like. I would think that those were all blessings and just awesome advancement. But it kind of is getting us further and further and further away from leaning on God.
There is a sense in which we can, through our own ability, forget to call on God. That we can become so self-sufficient that we forget that God is the author of all knowledge. God is the one who gives us the skills and the abilities and the talents to do things. God is the one who causes the rain to come down and the sun to shine and for plants to grow and for the harvest to be had. We can't force those things to happen. And of course, we know up to this point, there's no rain anyway. And so there's a sense in which they are becoming more and more dependent upon themselves and less dependent upon God. And we're going to finish the chapter tonight. We got about 7 minutes, but I want to finish this chapter because it shows this parallel. 25 and 26 says, Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in the place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth had a son, and he named him Enosh. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. Seth's line and Enosh call upon God, whereas Lamech's line through Enoch and Cain, they start themselves. Do you see the difference? Yes.
Remember how I have blue letters where it kind of
Yep, blue letters,
almost like it alludes to Jesus?
right?
That very last line, at the time the people first began to worship the Lord by name, and that is blue in my Bible.
That's a-
Like, this is the line that will lead us to Jesus.
Your Bible is very blatantly accentuating that while the other line is doing some amazing things, this is the line that stays in relationship with God. Is there anything wrong with being a tent maker? Anything wrong with being a shepherd? Anything wrong with playing musical instruments or making musical instruments? Anything wrong with working bronze or iron? Anything wrong with building cities? Anything wrong with having families? Those are all just neutral. It's a part of what God designed us to do. But all of those things, without keeping them in check, can cause us to lose sight of God. Any other thoughts as we close out chapter 4?
Can we assume that verse 25 is way up there, though? This isn't in chronological order.
It's not.
Okay.
In fact, verse 25 would be in the same as verse 17.
Okay. All right.
Well,
Or something.
strike that. 26 and 17 would be parallel.
Okay.
And next week, I promise, and I want to tell Melissa to make sure and help me remember, I will bring you all copies of my chart, age chart. I meant to do it before now, but I forgot to print it off. And I actually did the work from chapter 5 and tracked how old people were and how long they lived and all this kind of stuff, and I'll show you my chart. Any final thoughts? Then let's pray. Lord, you bless us. You bless us more than we could ever acknowledge and thank you for. And Lord, you never leave us or forsake us, even when we seek to push you away. So Lord, may we heed these warnings and be a people who call upon your name, who seek you first, who seek to honor you above all else. And Lord, may you go with us that we might live lives that bring you glory. We thank you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.